Friday. We gotta hit record. I'm gonna start over for us. Good evening, Augustonians. Welcome back to Lit Friday. If you are new, my name is Jessica Lene. I am the literary curator at the August Wilson African American Cultural Center and the host of Lit Friday. Lit Friday is a digital program that occurs on the final Friday of every month, and we feature artists, writers, thinkers, and amazing professionals such as Crystal Joseph from the African diaspora. We are closing out 2022, and the August Wilson African American Cultural Center wants to send our well wishes for the new year and all of your forthcoming endeavors. We hope that you have a moment this month to breathe and have some moments of peace. And we want to try to contribute to those possibilities. And as I said, Crystal, who's a licensed therapist, is here with me again for the third year in a row to help all of us learn some strategies around some of the more challenging aspects of the holidays and perhaps life in general. I have one announcement before we get started, and it is about our holiday community day tomorrow on December 17th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. There will be local vendors selling jewelry, art, clothing, and more. Live performances that include Damascus Theater, the Flow Band, and Kwanzaa dancers and drummers. And families will be able to learn more about Kwanzaa and engage in hands-on activities, receive free books while supplies last, and take pictures with Santa and Mrs. Claus. Bring your friends and family and come join us for Holiday Community Day. And now I have the great pleasure to introduce Crystal Joseph. Crystal is a licensed clinical professional counselor in Maryland, approved clinical supervisor, licensed professional counselor in Virginia, the author of Conversation with a Clinician of Color, Likeness, Lucy and Lemonade, a first-person research commentary, and Pound Cake and Private Practice, 5 Things I Learned During My First Year, a colorful, unadulterated book which delves into building a private practice from scratch. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Black Studies from the College of William and Mary, and a Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, Washington, DC campus. She owns PsycYourMind, Psych spelled PSYC, a thriving private practice in the DC Metropolitan area, where she holds space with persons affected by mental health challenges that are on the oncology continuum and have had culturally traumatic experiences. PsycYourMind, again, PSYC, Your Mind, is in its 3rd year of training up-and-coming therapists through its robust internship and residency program. So PsycYourMind is out here making sure that us Black folks have more options for therapy when we're looking for that touch that we need. When she's not in session, you can find Crystal cooking with cast iron or curating her shoe collection, which I'm very jealous of. She resides in the DC metropolitan area with her supportive husband. You can visit her website at psycyourmind.com, PSYCyourmind.com, for more information about her and her practice. She is also on social media. She's at Instagram at @thereal_psycyourmind. Again, psych is spelled PSYC. Twitter at PsycYourMind, and Facebook at facebook.com/PsycYourMind. Thanks again for joining us, Crystal. It's always a pleasure to have you. I always feel like it's like we have our own like personal friends phenomenon scene.
Yes.
Could you tell us where we can find or purchase your books? Because they're fascinating, amazing publications.
Absolutely. So the Conversation with a Clinician of Color, I can either email it directly to whomever, especially for research purposes, but it is published on Amazon. And then Pound Cake and Private Practice, 5 Things I Learned During My First Year is also on Amazon, but it's also at poundcakeandprivatepractice.com. I will ship out signed copies. Please note, though, I am currently out of office, so you won't see those ship out until January 3rd. And then I had the pleasure of producing a second book, Pound Cake and Private Practice, 5 Things I Learned During the Pandemic.
Wow.
So I published that. Thank you. So I published that this June. The foreword is by Dr. Afia Mbilishaka. And I think I had the actual hard copy in my hand like September 15th. So those started to ship out. Unfortunately, due to a death in the family, I had to reschedule the book talk. So it hasn't quite launched in the same way the first book did to the public. So we're hoping to reschedule that at the top of 2023.
Well, we would be excited to have you on Lit Friday to discuss that publication when you're
Yeah,
ready.
yeah,
So that way we can enter, we can engage you as a writer as well.
absolutely. I would love to.
Wonderful. So as far as I know, you have some tips and tricks before we get into the conversation.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so I went I don't want to call it high level, but I know, this time of the year can be fraught with a lot of anxieties and also physiological and mood changes due to the lack of sunlight, right? And so a lot of us who live in the mid-Atlantic, North Atlantic, Midwest region, we deal with four seasons, other places not so much. And I know, stepping outside or even looking out the window at 4:48 and it's black, the sun is setting, it's like, wait a minute, I have two more clients to go. And it's so dark outside. So I wanted to talk, and then with the recent passing of Twitch and just, the loss that we've experienced as a community in other ways, not just with some of our heroes leaving us. So I wanted to talk about um more of like how you navigate the mental health fields. How do you know when you need therapy, when to go? Is it for you? Options and resources as far as payment, the assumption that, mental health treatment is a luxury when in reality it's a necessity for all people. And I think that we as Black people tend to discount or discredit some of the intricacies that keep us going because we've always had to keep going and we've always had to survive. But at what point does that not become viable for us anymore?
Mhm.
And when do we actually reach out and say, okay, I need to shoulder this burden that I carry with someone else, whether it be a professional, a healing circle, Reiki, all of the things, right? So I think we should really try. I love that you made the announcement about your community day tomorrow with learning the tenets of Kwanzaa. My first introductions to that was my grandfather, who just passed when I was a kid. And so I remember him teaching us about the Kinyara and, all of the things. And so, just learning different aspects of our cultures and things that may have been lost over the years, decades, and centuries. So I definitely wanted to get into that. Let's see. So for navigating the mental health space, there are levels to this, right? I guess a lot of rappers, Meek Mill, have said it best, but um, a lot of times when people think about mental health and they think about what they may be dealing with, media may portray a certain way or the extremes of life, right? Like, oh, I had a cousin taken away from me by the system, or something of that nature. Those entities do exist. Yes, this is true. So I'll try to divide it up in levels. So I sit in private practice. Private practice is actually the lowest tier. So think of that as closest to the ground. I am operating in a space where my clientele and those that I serve can do a once a week session. They can go bi-weekly. They can go once a month for maintenance when they get to that point. But very, very low level form of service. Now, the hour of which we discuss certain things may feel heavy, but in consideration of all the things, it's low level. Above me, a higher level of care is the phrasing that we use. So a little bit more intense would be what's considered a partial, and forgive my language, I'm going to use the structural terms just so people know when they're Googling and looking if they come across it. But it's called partial hospitalization. So typically it's identified by the age sector. So I'm going to say adult partial hospitalization. So anyone over the age of 18. There are adolescent and children versions of that as well. And that is a program where there is 3 to 5 hours for 4 days of the week, where there's group and there's also individual sessions. And there's a hodgepodge of sector overlap of like, oh, well, this is the group for maybe substance use, and this
Mhm.
group is for loss of a loved one, so a grief group. And then you have an individual therapist that you see once a week while you're there. So a little bit more intense. More or less, you probably would not be employed out, going to work every day while you're in this program. So you would have some time off or some sort of FMLA or short-term disability applied for work so that you can operate and actually participate in this program. The program lengthwise is normally 4 to 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And then you graduate and you can return to your normal daily living based on needs, and you're connected to sometimes with other services, or you step down to say your community therapist, like where I sit. Above that would be intensive outpatient. So that's a little more intense, as the name suggests, 20 to 30 hours a week, same modality, but this time you might have a yoga instructor come in, a food preparer or culinarian come in. Um, there are age group factors as well. You're typically separated by age and or need. So say if you have an eating need that you need to clarify, get more clarification on, or psychoeducation on, you would go to a specific program for that. And the very top level would be what a lot of people assume, and it's inpatient care. And inpatient care can look like a lot of things.
Mhm.
You may need to have some sort of um, time where you're being assessed. Maybe your body metabolism have changed, and medications need to be changed. Know that it's very short form, though. Sometimes um, it would be maybe up to 10 days, 10 nights in the hospital at most. We say bed days. And then the highest level of care is residential. So that's when you see long-term programs of 4 to 6 months.
Mhm.
When you hear people sometimes say group homes, sometimes that's what they're talking about or referring to. So those are the levels of care, and none of which means you're crazy or you're insane or anything like that. I want us to get away from that. Asking for help and needing help does not mean that you're incompetent or you can't have a particular just reality in life, or how you used to see yourself, or how you see your future self. There's a way to get back to what you know yourself to be, and it could be at any one of those levels, and that's okay. And it's okay if you crosswalk them multiple times, or you stay at one level and never get to another. It's okay as well.
It's interesting because I think that usually the perception is that because of people are worried about cost, that going to a therapist once a week would be like the highest level of care. And based on what the media shows us about, residential care and how it's always
Yeah,
related to more negative like connotations, that would be the lowest level of care. So much of our conscientiousness is just flipped to see one as lower based on as higher based on the cost, and one as lower um,
great.
based on the perceptions that we're given of it. And I always wonder where such negative connotations with residential care come from. What are some of the benefits, but also setbacks of each form of care, from, like one-on-one, as what you're referring to, residential, outpatient, what, because I imagine that they have their benefits, but also their setbacks.
Absolutely. So, and I guess I'll go backwards, like primacy and recency effects. So, okay, we look at residential, right? Obviously, there's going to be a burden of cost, and I say that lightly. Don't peg me for this, but um, it depends on your financial resources as well. There are some justifications that can be provided for medical and mental health reasons that would justify why someone would need to be in residential. Thus, the clause in that insurance plan may cover it at 100%, whereas someone else, it might not be medically justified or justified to the 100% category of mental health. And so the bill is at 50% cost.
Mhm.
But obviously, the longer that you're there, the higher the bill. In a base world, right? Some of the drawbacks also could be your normalcy of what your outside life was prior to being admitted um, would be different than what you remember it to be possibly when you got out. So say your job title changes or you're not able to hold the same job function you had as you did when you first went in because of some needs of your own have changed. um I've worked at all these levels for your audience, so I've seen a lot of things. Stigma, unfortunately, is a plague of all of the levels. I've had the opportunity to see people from all walks of life traverse all sectors. And I remember particularly in the partial hospitalization program when I was leading groups, you have a lot of different type of people. And, sometimes those classes, if you will, uh, become more noticeable when people are starting to express how their mental health has affected them or how the psychosocial stressors are pressuring and pushing up against them and what they need. So someone who has access to financial resources more so than their neighbor in the chair next to them can quote unquote graduate from the program never to return because their medication is established. They can afford their medication ongoing. Their job is intact because they've reached tenure. Whereas someone else may go back into an environment that creates a higher proclivity of you having recidivism and you're back into this program. I see you come back in 6 weeks, before my internship ends, right? So you're going to see things like that. And it was something I learned from my supervisor while there. I'll never forget this. He said how a county, as far as money is concerned, how a county funds their mental health programs is how they treat their people. He said, follow the money. He said, never forget that. And so when you look at jail systems and mental health systems, it will tell you a lot about, the larger realm of the map, right? Like what that looks like. And so I think finances is probably the biggest drawback, as well as time away from your life normalcy. And then also the education to whomever is a loved one around you, right? So are you alone in this program by yourself trying to work through it? And that can be hard and isolating. Do you have a support system outside of this when you're dropped off after the program, or do you have visitors that come in during visiting hours to check on you, to bring you your creature comforts? What do you have, what do you need? And so I've seen where people don't have that, and I've seen where people do, and it makes a world of difference. So I would say those are the biggest drawbacks at all levels. On my level, one-to-one would be kind of what you named, that weird appropriation that I'm the highest luxury, I'm the most expensive. And it's cute, it's fine. But to be honest, I'm probably the least expensive outside of whatever your insurance would cover. Um, so I think those are the biggest, pluses and minuses.
And so I imagine that care, depending on where you are, can increase when you're closer to inner city areas, and can
Correct.
also be greatly limited. I have, like an acquaintance that found her therapist on Facebook because there was a clinician kind of going live in her private practice. So she was able
Mhm.
to do the sliding scale, and luckily everything worked out okay. And with the lack of accessibility in some places, there's also, I think, maybe the discouragement of not having your first session go well with a particular therapist, or feeling like you're not getting any callbacks, you're not getting your emails returned. Because, of
Yeah.
course, I think most therapists that do one-to-ones are extremely overwhelmed and have quite a few clients and are also only people and probably are going to see their own therapist. And
Yes.
yes. And so, what are some strategies or mindsets that people can work on while they're fielding these kind of almost inevitable challenges to normalizing an established access to therapy.
Yes. Thank you for humanizing us. Thank you for humanizing the profession. I think sometimes people forget that we're human. We will make mistakes, tech glitches on us. And so with that being said, depending on what the person that's seeking therapy, do you prefer phone calls? Do you prefer emails? Keep at it. And I've said this before, and I will continue to educate. And I can only speak for me because what I do is very intimate and I'm away from a phone and a computer most of the hours of the day because I'm in session. Um, Email is a better conduit of communication than phone. I do understand that some generations are far better on the phone than they are email. So I have both. But legally, I have to respond to you in writing. Now, stuff gets lost in the server, goes to spam by accident. I apologize for that. But the the phone system, it's like I have to call, check the voicemail, code the voicemails, then sit and call well, not me personally, but the assistant or the office manager. And so another thing that I will add is I have tried my best to invest back into the business where I've created various automations and pipelines, right? So if you see on my website, it says let's talk and it's pinned and it will literally push you to schedule a phone consultation. So when you see things like that, I say follow the pipeline, follow the rabbit, So if it's something that you are truly willing to partner for, even if it's just to sit with a consultation to see like, is this a good fit or who else is on the team that I could see, try your best to do that. But don't give up. I know it can be frustrating. I have my own therapist. I had to look for my own therapist just like the next person. So just because I'm in the profession doesn't mean it was any easier for me either. So I understand and I can echo the pain points. And I think that's why I have certain things constructed in the business the way that I do, because it's not fun. And when you already don't feel good or something's weighing on your heart, that's the last thing you want to have to navigate is waiting on someone to call you back or thinking that you have a top person you want to see and they're full. So I try my best to change some of the verbiage on the website just so the general public knows like, this is what's going on, this is who has openings, this is who doesn't. We're on vacation, so we're slow rolling the phone calls at this point. But please don't give up. Another thing to do, to your example, your anecdote of the woman finding someone on Facebook Live, we are on social media. We do engage in that way, with respectfully so within whatever ethical code or legal law, confines that we're under. But if you see someone going live that you're interested in, check them out. Watch. I've had people watch me from a distance and later tell me when I ask, how'd you find out about me? And I'm thinking, it's some directory. And then I hear that were sitting in the fifth row of an audience somewhere. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, we're in the community as much as we can with these times, right? But definitely get your list together. There's multiple directories now that I'm proud that I'm listed on, but I'm proud of the founders of those directories, because the more the merrier. There's only 4 to 5% of us, so the more visible we are, the better. Um, and then keep Googling, keep searching. To your point about sliding scale, there's nothing. Ask the questions. I find that people don't ask the questions. Ask the questions via email as many as you can in the 20-minute consultation, whatever it takes, but ask the question. There is no stupid question. Ask it. And if we don't know, we'll tell you, or we'll tell you where to go to find the answer. There are some components of, say, for example, insurance that we just can't answer. There are so many different underwriting criteria. So you would have to ask and call. And I know that's another fear factor or pain point. And I understand if someone is overwhelmed and they've already trying to call a therapist and they have this other doctor too for their physical health. And then I'm saying, oh, well, you need to call your insurance company to understand your benefits. That's frustrating to hear. I know it is, and I'm sorry. But there are just so many things about it that we don't know and we honestly can get in trouble for if we misinterpret it. So the insurance companies typically will answer the phone faster for you as the member than they will for us as the provider.
And I wanted to back up and go into like a small conversation about social media, because this is a new phenomenon. We're seeing lots and lots of therapists who deal with overlooked communities, right? So we see
Yes.
therapists for people of different LGBTQIA plus statuses. We see
Mhm.
therapists who specialize in people who are experiencing mental health crises from serial racialized microaggressions and racialized trauma, people
Mhm.
on the oncology spectrum. And it can be really hard via social media to figure out who's just giving you good advice, or who giving you what they think is good advice, and who's actually a licensed therapist that is actually not only working within the parameters of the law and what they can advise, right, in
Right.
public, but also those people who would like very much to help others, but do not necessarily have the clinical and or educational experiences to do so. So if there's
Yes.
just a normal person on social media who's going through the kind of mental health tab or search, what are some green flags they should look for?
This is such a great this is a great point. So, I will speak for myself because I know some people don't list their letters that my mother calls it alphabet soup, so I'll use her phrase. So you want to look for some alphabet soup, right? This might not be the end all begin all. Some people don't list it, but depending on how your bio is set up, whether you have an iPhone or a Droid, tends how you capture your data.
Right.
The general public, what they don't realize that people in our realm and other healthcare professions know, if you go to a particular state that I say that I'm licensed in, and of course you kind of have to reverse engineer search and like what does she have posted on her website versus Instagram. And if I say that I'm licensed in Maryland and Virginia, then if you go to Maryland and Virginia's Board of Counseling, which is what my licensure falls under, my name should actively be present there. I should not have any sort of derogatory marks, any reprimands, suspensions, things of that nature. There are times where people have hearings and are suspended for various reasons. Then their license is reinstated because they've met whatever quote unquote reprimands, fines that needed to be met. And that would also be listed.
Mhm.
So there are various healthcare professional boards. So you wouldn't find my name under the social work board because social work is not my degree and it's not my specialty. But you would see some sort of lettering behind most persons that are in our fields. And something that Jessica is bringing up is we have laws and we have ethics. Sometimes they both agree with each other. Sometimes there's an overlap and a disagreement in that way, and that's when your attorney comes in. But I
Mhm.
say all that to say that the ethical code is to protect you as the client. It gauges our behavior. It's parameters of how we are to behave. Now, there's a lot of conversation in our community about how whitewashed these ethics are because they don't necessarily reflect how Black and Brown people, operate in life. It's not the norm. It's not the day to day. Fine. But I do believe that there is some level of protection in it on purpose because I don't want to do any harm to my people more than it's already been done. And I want to make sure that I'm operating within the standards of what I've learned, the skill sets that I continue to refine over time because we're required to get continuing education. We're not just these stagnant professionals, we're lifelong learners. And so there's nothing wrong with other persons out there wanting to help people, but please do your due diligence and research as much as you can. And if you're someone on this call who is not fond of Google and not fond of Instagram, bring in a different generation to help you make some considerations and make some assessments of who you would like your therapist to be. I think, now that there's some legislation being entered with regards to TikTok and things like that. I think we as professionals also have to be careful about what conduits we use to become more visible. And so, how will we reach people? And to your point, yeah, are we just blowing sunshine on on these platforms, or can we really produce? And I think anyone can get on a screen for 15, 60, 90 seconds and regurgitate something, right? And make it look good. But when you're sitting in front of me for an hour, week after week, how much value am I adding to your life? And
Mhm.
I think that's where the rubber meets the road, and where time and engagement, only time will tell with that, right? And not everyone's a good fit. You may like me as a person, but be like, Crystal, I'm just, this isn't working. And that's okay. I have colleagues. I can refer you out to various colleagues. People need different things. Someone might need someone a little more confrontational than I am. Someone may need me because they like the educational piece that comes with the neuroscience. It just depends. But I think you bring up a good point. And you can have multiple helpers and healers on your team. Not all of us have to be exactly like me and have the same trajectory that I've had professionally, but there is definitely something worthy when you have the letters. Now granted, everybody's not savory, so you can have the letters and still not be a great person. There's that too.
Okay.
um so choose choose wisely. This is definitely hard work. This is definitely healing work. You don't want to be somewhere where you're being harmed. There are going to be times though in session where the dust is going to kick up and it's not going to feel so great, but you got to get through that, and you got to come back. So I don't want you to confuse that with someone that's just not good for you. That's just part of the process.
And so you made a comment about not being a social worker. And I also think that there's probably some baseline confusion about, well, when would I see a psychiatrist? When would I
Yes.
see a psychologist? Am I
Yes.
talking to a social worker, somebody that's legally required to report my living circumstances to the authorities? That's an
Yes.
important question when it comes to impoverished communities and or and impoverished communities of color. Um,
Yeah.
and that has to do with like being Black, being brown, immigration.
Yep.
You may be a wonderful mother, but be having trouble with resources and need to speak to somebody, but that person would report. And so, how do you know the difference between a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, and a social worker? And how do you determine which one you actually is you're safe to speak with?
That's a great question. Okay, so all of the professionals that Jessica just named were all actually mandated reporters. And so, if someone is harming you, you're going to harm someone else, or you're going to harm yourself. We do have to report. Now, with that being said, though, I gave the example of, seeing your cousin being removed from the home when you were kids. And of course, everyone attributes that to social work. Um, what I want the general public to know is licensed clinical social workers, and there's the lettering varies across the state, but I'll say licensed clinical social workers. So you'll see LCSW in some places. Not all of them are pushing paper and trying to figure out what little Johnny down the street is doing so they can take him and put him into a foster home, right? And so I want us to get that out of our heads. What I would say the best point of entry would be is, say if you have a therapist, which could be anyone of the list Jessica named actually. Psychiatrists will do 15 minutes of medication management check-in, but they're not going to do a full hour. And so, well, I have one on my roster who she actually will sit with you that long, but um, take the time to let someone know what you need in session. And then, for example, if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, Crystal, I think, I'm struggling with my attention now that I'm working from the screen at home. This is just, I'm getting written up at work. My productivity has changed. I'm like, okay, we might need to get you assessed. Call your insurance company to see if, a psychological assessment is covered. They go through all that. So then I connect you with a psychologist from my referral sheet. So he, she, or they will give a battery of assessments and run it through your insurance. Some of them are private pay only, and then you get your results back so you can code it through work and get an accommodation. And then I get the data as well. I know how to interpret the data, and then we can work on some other real coping strategies. But then a third party that might be introduced based on their assessment would be, well, we might need to give you some stimulants. So a prescriber. So I don't prescribe. Psychologists in most states, to my knowledge, do not prescribe. So then a psychiatrist, who is actually an MD behind their name, a medical doctor, would be brought in. And I actually have several on my referral sheet I'm very proud of. They are Black women. And you don't find that. I think they're at 2% of the healthcare profession in that regard. And so they will assess, they read my notes, they'll read the psychologist assessment. And so we all work together in tandem. I spend the most time with you week to week, so I get a lot of the data, the sometimes your medication side effects, so then I can report out in real time, and hold on to that information so that you don't forget in the next 3 months that you go back and see the prescriber for a new prescription. The only time that you would see, for example, a psychiatrist like day one, so to speak, is if you enter at the highest level of care, second tier, my apologies, say in the hospital, and the attending there may be a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and they give you prescriptions and prescribe you something, say, for the 5 days you're in the hospital. Upon discharge, though, um, the best thing would be to connect with the therapist in your community as well as a psychiatrist. And there may be something about your medications that remain the same, or your medications may change slightly for a long-term effect. Something I would like to tell our community too about medication: please make sure you're getting your lab work done. Um, just because there's so many other physical things that our bodies go through, manifestations of stress. Please make sure that whoever's prescribing understands how your body is going to metabolize those medications. I think, sometimes we have a fear of like, oh, I don't want any medications, I'm fine. But you may need some medications to help process, give you some help, help process neurotransmitter pathways, things like that. But know that, it goes through your kidney, and your liver has to filter that as well. And then, for me, because my specialty floats with those who have been diagnosed with cancer, we definitely have to make sure everything's on the up and up should they need um, mental health, psychotropic medication, as well as their oncological medication, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation, all of that. So,
And so one of your specialities is dealing with, like chronic mental health situations that are the result of actually experiencing racism. And
mhm,
I cannot tell you how many times I have heard people say, black people especially that are in therapy, like, yeah, my therapist is fine, but I can't talk to her about the
mhm,
microaggressions at work. I
mhm,
can't talk to him about, what my academic department is doing to me. They don't seem
mhm,
to understand, or they don't know how to engage it,
mhm,
or they're asked questions that make what they're experiencing seem more interperson, like more of a personality, a non-meeting of personality, rather
mhm,
than like a socially sustained training and how to, oppress other people. And
yeah,
I would just wonder, why are so few
mhm,
therapists prepared to work through those challenging things? What's missing from the curriculum, and why aren't the effects of misogyny, anti-LGBTQIA plus hate, and racism
mhm,
kind of just like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they are very much in the curriculum now, but
mhm,
what's the disconnect between being able to support your client that are going
yeah.
through those things? Um, why is that such a lacking, it seems, skill set among so many therapists?
I hmm, I personally believe the curriculum followed the majority funded by the money, and it just kept repeating over time, right? And if you already felt that Black and brown people were insignificant, or you built things on our backs, why would I need to include you? Because you're over there, you can't even drink from my water fountain, these things. Now, granted, that being said, there are Black psychologists that were alive and researching and printing and publishing that I didn't learn about until, to be honest, after grad school. And so, when you mentioned Franz Fanon, just these beautiful, wonderful minds and contributors to the greater society, but also my field. Um, what is happening currently with us being at 4 to 5% of the professional population? Yes, you're correct. We're overwhelmed. We're doing the best we can. One of my missions is to train the next generation of therapists, which is why I am an approved clinical supervisor, so I can just keep pushing people in and up and through. But I can only do so much, right? And so I had the courtesy of taking Shauna Murray Brown's Decolonizing Therapy for Black Folk, her course. It's a 16 credit course, maybe it might be 2020. Yeah, so 2 years ago in the summer. And one of the themes that I got out of that overall, like as far as reflective of her mission, is anyone who's willing to decolonize their mindset, no matter what they look like in our profession. If you're down to take this training to help my people, to help this community, come take it. And I was surrounded by so many different people from so many different walks of life, but also people who were of the majority, who wanted to really re-educate and unlearn a lot of the things that have been, her term is, injected into us to perform and think a certain way. And so what is happening, and I agree with this, there's nothing wrong if you're in an area where you're not getting callbacks from the Black therapist that you want, but you feel that there may be a majority therapist who can walk the walk, talk the talk, and hold space with you, and just a particular way, then do that. Don't let your mental health go wayward, waiting too long, because life keeps happening to us every day. You can't unzip your skin. So we walk outside, like I go outside, no one cares that I own a business. Nobody cares that I'm recognized by these people. Nobody cares that I'm holding contracts with these other entities. They see a Black woman, and based on their biases, they're going to behave a certain way toward a Black woman. And so um there are people out here. She has a therapist directory. It's called Therapy That Liberates. So if you go to that one, you're going to see all different types of therapists. Whereas if you say go to Therapy for Black Girls, the mostly Black women will be featured there. But it's okay. I understand that people are in various regions of the country, and your options are your options. Telehealth has been helpful, but because of laws and state boundaries, we're still working on it with parity. But some of us can still only practice, like, where our physical boundaries are. So, but yeah, that's hard. And I never want, I've heard horror stories. Oh, my therapist fell asleep on me. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I don't know, maybe if they were medicated and just should have just stayed home. I'm not sure. And then I've heard, like, oh, it's the sixth session in, and I keep having to explain to her, fill in the blank for some cultural reference that we would know kind of like off top what that is. And so I'm not an emissary of Black people. I don't, of Blackness, right? Like, I haven't lived all Black experiences, but there's not much that a client can say to me that I haven't heard or don't know about. And so I do think semblance in that way is important, and it serves as a currency that continues to just flow and reciprocate during the session. And as you heal and as you learn more coping skills and learn about yourself, you're just better about it, instead of worrying about, well, is Crystal going to understand if I say, XYZ? So yeah.
Yeah, it can definitely be a challenge. There's another like hot topic. Like, I'm usually bring up hot content, and the hot topic now is this idea of no contact, going no contact. It's something, it's a quite pervasive
Hmm.
option that people are engaging, and it's an option that people are engaging when they can't find the resources to help them figure out strategies to manage the difficult relationship they're considering going no contact with. But it
Mhm.
seems that also people may not understand what no contact is or how it works. And so my question around no contact is, what is no contact? What does that mean? And what does that look like, especially for Black individuals that are considering doing this, when we know that our communities are so important to us, our families are so important to us, and they make a difference when it comes to our sense of safety, our sense of
Yes.
wholeness, and our sense of recognition. That
Yeah.
idea of no contact can seem daunting, but may be one of the more immediate ways to seek relief. So what is no
Yeah.
contact, and how, and what does that mean in particular to,
Yeah.
like Black clientele or Black folks that are needing some relief immediately but don't know what that means or how it's supposed to look, or even are questioning whether or not that's a healthy option whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, okay, as I understand it and how I would like to see it done is you would give someone almost like a contract ahead of time, right? So say if I need no contact from my sister because she's, driving me up the wall and she's overstayed her welcome or, something like that.
Mhm.
Hey, I'm creating this boundary. And I know we talked about boundaries last year, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
boundaries.
I'm creating this fence, and this is going to be a brick fence that's 20 feet tall. You can't scale it. And I'm going to be off the grid for, I don't know, 3 months. And I would appreciate it if you not call me. I will not contact you. I don't know, like a shared bank account, or whatever it is. But it's like not so much limiting, but even if it's like, I will transfer $20 to your account every 2 weeks because this is what you're expecting to live to feed the cat or something, something of that nature. And I just need some space and time to gather myself, and I think a lot of times when people hear that, the other party always or tends to become defensive and, oh my goodness. I want people to understand that no contact and boundaries is more about the person enforcing them than
Mhm.
you per se. Yes, you're fluttering some things in the environment for them, but then pull out. Now, to your point about our communities and just, we're communal people,
Right.
and the pandemic hasn't helped. It's kind of put a tear in our tapestry, and for people who used to have a certain level of community engagement but have found solace and maybe have enjoyed some peace of mind being isolated, that's okay too. But I want us to know that you have to dose yourself out. You can't overdo any one of those things. So you can't be at all the holiday parties for the 4 weeks of, the winter season or something and not expect to be burned out. But also you can't sit up, hold up in your room um for the 4 weeks and not expect to have some sort of weird sense of withdrawal or feeling like you're not yourself. And so I think also something I've seen with no contact too is people will give the other party ways in which they will only engage with them, right?
Mhm.
So a pet peeve that I hear about often is so and so always FaceTimes me and I wish they would just give me advance notice because I ignore it and then they get mad. Versus if they had said, I'm going to FaceTime you at 7, then that person can properly prepare themselves and or say, well, 7's not a good time, but I can do 7:30. And
Mhm.
so then that's more of open communication between both people. So there's no disagreement, there's no confusion, and you move through it in that way. Um, for Black and Brown people's safety, though, as far as no contact is concerned,
Mhm.
please create some sort of safety clause and parameter um, because of trafficking and expendability of Black bodies as perceived by other parties. Please make sure that there is some way someone knows you're safe. So I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing your location with someone. There's some sort of safe word that you can, um, message out if something is wrong. But just something. People do care about you, people do love you. They may drive you bonkers. But I'm sure, if something happened, they would want to know. and also those with chronic illnesses, that as well. Make sure, you know, people know you're okay.
So it sounds like no contact is kind of like the ultimate step along a partnership with different individuals where you're testing boundaries or
Yep.
you're giving boundaries and seeing if those boundaries can be respected. And
Yeah.
no contact is not something you arbitrarily do when you've had an argument or
No.
you're just upset, or I think everyone's seen that video of the woman talking to her sister. She's like, you put 12 eggs in the macaroni and cheese and nobody told you to do that and it's nasty, so you're gonna clean all the dish. Like, that's not a no contact situation. No
No.
contact is the absolute last resort after not only seeking some kind of mental health support for yourself,
Yeah.
but also trying to fairly engage with the person that's making you feel as if you need space to say, can
Right.
we try out some boundaries together, so that way we have a structured way to talk about when we're upset. And it's only after everything else has failed, especially in the Black and Brown community, because we depend on each other and we need
Mhm.
each other to say, okay, I'm absolutely going ghost with notice.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Because it's kind of being spoken about like it's just something you can just do. Like you can just do for
Mhm.
a month or two until you feel better and then get back in touch and pick up the baton of the relationship whenever you feel
Yeah.
like it. And so I think this is something that's also just a part of like the social media mental health care space, is that there's not a whole lot of nuance about,
Mm-mm.
the fact that mental health takes a little bit every day.
Yes.
It takes a
Baby
little bit every
steps.
day. It takes baby steps every day. It's not just one action that
Mm-mm.
makes everything better, or even will perfect a certain kind of relationship as much as it
Right.
makes it easier to maintain a relationship that may be a necessity but come with some difficult caveats.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, everything is not sunshine and butterflies, right? We
Mhm.
have to embrace the thorns and the rain too. And so difficulties do come up in life. And I want us to have a level of steadfastness and tenacity when we approach various issues that make us uncomfortable, because there's going to be some discomfort. Now, I'm not saying you need to be, you know, just down and out all of the time and things like that. But if an uncomfortable conversation comes up, you know, state your discomfort and sit with those feelings, and then maybe process it with your therapist the next week, or with the, you know, with that person, like, hey, I need a break from this conversation. Let's talk about this tomorrow. You know, whatever the situation, the discourse is. And so I think we have to, social media has put in our minds that everything is just always a highlight and it's always
Yeah.
pretty, and it's not. It's just not.
And so another question that of course I have many questions. I always have so many questions that I have. And I think I've asked you this question every single year.
Mhm,
There are going to be times where you cannot access therapy,
mhm,
either because you don't have health insurance or you have health insurance that won't cover it and you don't have the money. There's
mhm,
going to be a waiting period while you're waiting to hop onto somebody's roster of weekly or
mhm,
biweekly or monthly patients.
mhm,
And there may be, moments where you lose healthcare or you lose access to a resource that helps you get therapy. And
mhm.
so, what I think is really, really important is for people to kind of know that therapy is not always the only option or the option that's most available to you. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can't get to group therapy because group therapy is at 4:30 and you're working until 6 on the regular every single day.
Yeah.
What are some other ways that people can self-soothe and
Yes.
self-comfort that are healthy, that will
Yes.
help them in the interim while they're waiting on therapy to start or waiting for the resources to help them get to therapy to come
Mhm.
back into their life?
Absolutely. So I'm gonna say exercise. And I'm not saying you need to be throwing 300 pounds or something like that, but it can be cardio, dance, whether you're dancing in your living room. I'm not even saying like you have to register for a dance class. Dance, Zumba, swimming. If you swim, that is a form of exercise. Cycling, biking, whichever
Support
term
your
you
local
prefer.
Y.
Yes, yes, I'm a YMCA kid. I did aftercare program on LaSalle Avenue in Hampton, Virginia. So that's practically who raised me. So those things. I you say healthy. Cooking is good for the soul. Jessica knows that I love to cook. It's just something therapeutic about it. You've seen the memes, like I don't measure. I have to feel it. Like I pour until I'm told to stop. Like I don't I don't measure. Um, calling the good girlfriend, getting the guys together, a game night. Growing up in high school, we used to do a game night every Thursday night, which seemingly unorthodox, right? Because you had school the next day. We all went to school 5 days a week, but it was just so nice. And it was just a nice something to look forward to, almost like a reward. And then it helped you get through the Friday, and then you came home and still had your weekend. Some other more high touch things that possibly could be covered by insurance that I find that people overlook. Acupuncture.
Wow, okay.
Um, I definitely am a firm believer in acupuncture. It has really helped me during some rough times, just where stress manifests itself physically.
Yes.
A nice massage. Sometimes you can get a medical justification to get one 4 times a year, and it's covered at 100%. So massages there, there's a lot of spas opening up in my region with various entrance fees, but you can stay for up to 12 hours. A lot of Asian inspired spas, so those are great. Time with those you love, whether it's the younger group or your elders, you're sitting in front of them talking. Coloring is good, crossword searches, and of course it wouldn't be Lit Friday without me saying reading a good book.
Reading a good
Curling,
book. Get out,
yes,
get out,
yeah,
get
yes.
out of get into another reality. A book is a doorway, y'all. A
Escape,
book is a
yes.
doorway. A book is like walking through the Narnia closet. You're in a different reality. Read a book. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And
Support your
it,
local library. Yes.
yeah, and yes, and it doesn't matter what pace you read at. I know I hear people feeling uh, maybe envious because they can't get through 50 books in a year or things like that. Whatever pace, it's fine. Get a book. I do better with short form essays, because I have to do a lot of reading for work anyway. So I like to be able to
Right.
put it down, pick it back up. I love a good mystery as far as like true escapism.
Oh,
I like to
yes,
get in
absolutely.
there. Yeah, a good
Hmm.
mystery. So I can flip back and say, okay, I remember when this happened. So definitely a good book. Even good, we have Netflix and things now where we can binge watch. So a good series, get your popcorn going, and sit for a couple hours. Ladies, do your hair. Men, if you groom yourself at home and cut your hair. New lipstick. Jessica and I love lipstick.
Yes, I love it.
Try a new color. So all of those things I think are good self-soothing until you can get where need to be. Get where you need
And
to
so
be.
it seems like it to be about changing a state, to remind yourself that your state of mind doesn't have to be permanent. It's not forever. And there are things you can do. Like I had the opportunity to interview Ime Alaquiva, and he's, like Emmy award winning, like director and producer and photographer, just an
Yes.
amazing guy. And one of the things he said was, do things that kind of like squeeze out that dopamine. Wash your hair, condition your scalp, paint your nails at home,
Yes.
like do yourself a little facial with like the honey you already have, and
Yes.
whatever else you already have. Like, get creative with the resources you already have, because I think sometimes self-care or self-therapy, people are always telling you to consume things, to buy things, but you
Mm-mm.
have things all around you that are free and accessible, that can
Yes.
help you change your state for a temporary amount of time to get you some relief. It doesn't mean that it's going to cure your depression or your
Mm,
generalized anxiety, perhaps, but it
yeah.
does mean that you can kind of trick your brain into focusing on something else intently to give yourself some relief. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's fun, but then what will happen if you continue to practice these things? Your brain starts to look forward to it, and then
Yes.
it wants it. And so then the more you do it, the less time spans of that particular distress that you're in. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's about that time. I have to
Ah,
thank you so much for always being with us in December. It's one of the it's a strange month. It's an exciting month, but it's
mhm.
also a hard month because
Yeah.
you may have your seasonal depression, you may be suffering from a lack of vitamin D, lack of light, you may be anxious about family, you may be so ecstatic about family that you just can't stand it. And I enjoy seeing people in that state. But I just always want to reassure our viewers who turn into this Lit Friday in particular, which is our traditional Lit Friday. It's one of our Lit Fridays that is always the same.
Mm,
There is a way, there is opportunity.
mm,
Yes, there's some labor involved, but you
yeah.
can do it. You can get the resources that you need to feel like you are able to, what's the saying? Accept the things you cannot change,
Yes.
right? Accept
Yes.
the things you
Yes.
cannot change and focus on what you can do something about.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Yes. Thanks,
I
everyone.
can't wait to have you back to talk about your book. It's going to be really
Yeah.
exciting, and I can't wait to read it. It's going to be wonderful. I want to give a big thank you to Sydney Hale, who's, our Oz in the background DJing for us and keeping things going with the Zoom. And everyone, please enjoy your holidays. Get
Mm,
rest. Use your strategies. Use your tactics. And do your best to take care of yourself and enjoy those around you who support and love you. And thank everybody
mhm.
so much. Happy 2023.
Yay. New
Have a good
Year.
night.
Bye.